I've come across NLP before, short for neuro-linguistic programming, in the
Mm.
context of time management. But could you spell out a bit how you see it applying to Brexitism?
Well, it is one of the three planks that I use in the book. Well, I use other parts of psychology. I'm a sort of a very much a sort of a collect things up that are useful rather than a slave to a particular discipline. Neurolinguistic program, actually, the ridiculous title does describe exactly what it is on the tin. So it's the effect of language, both body language and syntax, the linguistic part. It's the effect of what we say and how we say it on people's minds, and how we can. And here comes the bit that people hate: program. This is Americanism. Change people's minds as if you're programming them. No, there is no programming. People are free thinking individuals. You can't make them do anything, but you can provide explanations that help them see things differently, and over time they start to unwind. So the NLP part particularly is how we use language. There's tons of stuff in the book about linguistics, of how we use different sorts of questions to open up possibilities or close them down, and so on and so forth. But the programming bit, I have a real problem with. There's lots of people who loathe NLP and have said it's all made up. Well, actually, it is, of course. It was made up by a linguist and a computer programmer in the 1970s. That doesn't mean to say it's not useful. What they did, the two people that originated this, they studied what made people excellent and what marked them out from being people who were just average. And so they developed some tools about how you make bonds with people, rapport, how you listen better than other people, and things like these. And these are all useful, tradable tools. Where it becomes problematic is NLP is probably the sort of thing you want to use if you're going to run a cult or the Conservative Party, for example. So of course, Paul McKenna used some of those tools to help come up with the slogans. That doesn't demean or condemn NLP. It condemns the people that use it in a perverse way. And I liken NLP to judo in a way that if you take up judo for a hobby, you are supposed to take a Hippocratic oath about what you're not going to use it on the street randomly on people. And so it's the same with NLP. You can sell someone a timeshare holiday they didn't want once, or a used car they didn't want once, but you're not going to do it again. So used in that sort of without ethics, it has a darker side to it. Like many sort of powerful disciplines, I think what we need to do is take the upstroke on this subject and ask very clever questions. And when people say, like it talks about generalizations, for example, everyone agrees that the bananas are this, and you go, is it everyone? And you just listen intently to the markers that people put into language and the assumptions they build in, so you can use it at that sort of linguistic level without seeming to be some sort of satanic exorcist. Really, does that help a bit?
I did like your Indonesia analogy,
Mm.
because that, to me, is the key problem. We can't all go off and do a Peter Cook, that's for sure. So we have to sort of be supportive in some way. And indeed, you're not the only big island out there, because there are quite a few people who are trying to. We've got the Rejoin movement, and we've got the European movement itself. So I just wonder whether you'd like to say a few words about your relationship with those other organisations, particularly the European movement, of course, which we all belong to.
Well, I am the chair of Mid Kent European Movement still.
Oh, right.
It has been a rocky ride, I have to say. I'm not going to go into that on here because it relates to a former chief executive, and they've now gone. And Andrew Adonis, I thought Andrew particularly was wrong when he condemned the Conservative Party and tried to target Conservative MPs, because the European movement's mission has always been very sensibly to be of all parties and none. And bearing in mind that Brexit was not done as a party political thing, it crossed so many boundaries. The way into it was through all parties people had something invested in Brexit or not, whichever party they were in. So the way out of it is also through cross-party work. And I was in Parliament this week talking to Tobias Elwood, who was, quite elated about David Cameron's arrival. Some other people, Liz Truss was scowling. I thought she was scowling at me, but in fact, it was generalised scowling. I noticed she was scowling at everyone. This was on Tuesday morning. To come to your point, I've done work particularly with the European movement, street stalls, all the stuff we've done with EM. I do understand they see Best for Britain. I said there were some big islands, and Best for Britain is one of the bigger islands in the EM. I gather that they didn't used to get on too well, but that the chief executive has now moved. So maybe, if the big islands can't collaborate, how with the little ones? And I know John Danzig and various other people, and I think a lot of people have tried to collaborate. And I used to run monthly meetings, and we've got things up like letter writing campaigns, actual doing work in the field, to specific projects with other people. So I've worked with the EU flag mafia, all kinds of groups who want to collaborate, but not everyone can and not everyone does. You're absolutely right, John. People have that discretionary 2% of their time on a Saturday, and you can't always work. I do think that's why, and one of my big disappointments really is that at one point I tried to see if we could build not a critical mass that with someone at the head of it, because I think there is also a problem when people think that you have to have a heroic leader. What we need is a network organization, a distributed leadership with people who can say I did write to the EM years ago, and I suggested that in my work as an organization consultant, what we needed to have was people who could corral projects. So rather than Robbie Williams, if we're thinking about music for a moment, the lone hero, what we needed was the Spice Girls. Hold the thought for a moment. So if someone were dealing with rail industry or logistics or transport, we needed a figurehead in that area who would then corral people from across these networks, and we would know who was good at what, and they would perhaps belong in the circle of logistics, for example. Or if there were regional things that were mattered to people, you might have some geographical clusters. And what we really needed to know is what everyone was good at. But people, and then you could say, well, how much time have you got? When can you give it to us? And you can start then to really build movement. My problem with Indonesia is we can all do little things on our own. If we try to work at scale, we usually can't do it. The only things we can really do at scale are marches, and even those have been poorly attended, because people have basically got learned helplessness. They think, what's the point? What can I do about it? So it is one of my bugbears and one of my great failures and it's an immense challenge to people like EM and Best for Britain, because it's notionally it's 16.5 million people. Even Unilever don't have that many people, but we don't need traditional models of to run this sort of organization, like a sort of hierarchy, a machine bureaucracy of everyone sort of in their little boxes. What we do need to know is who's good at what, and then somehow get them into different circles. I did have another presentation, which I used to use to encourage people into Reboot Britain. I talked about overlapping circles. That you might be in I want to work on parliamentary paralysis because I'm good at lobbying. Right, you're in that circle with that. I want to work on social media only. That's fine. Let's find some other clusters. And we have actually over time built some quite good clusters of people. But I am at the point of thinking that this is now, it needs someone with the resources to do it, which is actually why I have put my effort into Gina Miller, because she has a professional organization. She hires people. She's not just relying on volunteers. And, I've decided to throw my lot in with Gina for that. That is a very long answer. Does it provoke any other questions? But we do collaborate a lot, actually. I've driven a Mini from Barnard Castle, from Dominic Cummings' house to Barnard Castle and back. We've been to Brussels. We've been everywhere doing different things. Some of it's street based, but of course, lots of people have time to do stuff online. So that's the easier thing to do. And we have these anti-Brexit virus groups on different platforms. And the idea is not to chat, because that is just therapy. Just multiply the impact by, if someone puts their stuff in there, you just share it. And, you know, the rule is you share their stuff and they share yours. People still say, I only want to share what I want to share. So, so I never insist, but I try to have rules, which is, we multiply each other's effort by sharing each other's stuff without prejudice or fear, but people aren't like that. So
I haven't got a question. I just found it, to use your word, Peter, cathartic. It's nice to find, similar thinkers, because it has gone so dreadfully quiet, certainly here in Sussex. There doesn't seem to be an awful lot going on. I do feel sometimes the lone voice, and I think people are like, why bother? So, everything you've said has really resonated, and I feel a bit more fired up.
The last thing I did was we took the Mini down to New Haven, and then along the coast to Brighton, where we did the event with John T. Bloom. And then the Mini blew up on the way up home on the M23, and the camshaft fell off, which was the end of the Mini, actually.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
But every time I go out to do things, it disproves the fact that people aren't interested in Brexit. They aren't interested because nobody's talked to them about it. We had loads of people coming up and people saying, oh, what a mess. There was a man who was in tears at, I think it was New Haven. He's got his son's plaque on a bench by the Martello Tower there. And he came up to us and he was saying that, I'm really sorry I voted for Brexit. It's such a mess. And my son died a few years ago. And well, one of the people I was with wanted to hit him. And the organizer said, no. So she pushed him away. I was talking about what he liked music-wise, and he liked Neil Young, so I sang him "Rocking in the Free World," and he had his arm around me. He was in tears. I mean, it was really quite. Music's only part of life, really, but it does reach different parts,
doesn't it?
And he was absolutely bowled over by the reception he got from us, because he didn't get pushed away, and he ended up trying to sing. He was a really bad singer, actually, but never mind that small point. But he went away, and he'll tell 5 other people, and that's the kind of thing we need to do, actually. But it's not true to say that nobody's interested in Brexit. They've been silenced. That is one of the problems, and all the parties have silenced them, which is why I do urge you, even if you don't agree with me, to have a look at the article on David Cameron. It didn't just come out of my head. As I say, I was meeting with Tobias Elwood the other day for something else, and he believes this is an intentional strategy. Because Rishi Sunak needs 12 rabbits, I think, at least 12, maybe 15, even just to fail less badly. I mean, it's quite clear that he will probably lose. So on his Wikipedia page, it just needs to say he didn't lose as badly as he would have done. That's what his epitaph would be. I know David Davis today said, we can win. I'm meeting David on Tuesday. I'm going to sort him out along with Claire Fox, but at the event that Gina's got going to. But no, there's it is really difficult to get people out. I've been round to Sandwich, Deal and other places recently, and every time we go on the street, even in those Brexity regions, I live in Kent, if you talk to people, they're now, as long as you don't embarrass them because they did vote for it, they will eventually tell you that, or admit that it's not going very well. There's the hardcore that say, well, it's because of you lot. That's, or Brexit is, the Brexit sunny uplands have been defeated by the weather. They're a very small contingent now. There will always be a residual hardcore. And I don't know if you've noticed, but that curve of people that were pro or anti, it was level for a long, long time. And then it sort of moved up quite a bit to about 63% who thought it was a mistake. And it's going up quite quickly now. And I predicted it would be 70% by mid-2024, at which point politicians have to listen. it will be asymptotic if you're a scientist. In other words, it will level off. I'll do it backwards. And it will level off at the residual level of racists, I think. And will that be 7%? You know, will it go to 93%? Will it go to 87%? I don't know. But it will level off. But it will pass 70% undoubtedly, because it is going quite at a rate now. And that's a real problem. And my intel says that Cameron's been brought in to do something about this, along with a lot of other things, maybe. And never mind Greensill. I'm not forgiving him for any of that, by the way. But nonetheless, I say play the ball, not the man. And Rishi Sunak, unlike Boris, if Boris had done Cameron, he'd gone, oh, get David Cameron back in, get the pigs going, and have a cigarette. He'd have a cigar and a glass of whiskey or something, and say, well, get David Cameron in, to hell with the consequences. Rishi will have done a spreadsheet on this.
Yes.
And he will have priced the impact of Braverman into the, he'll have thought about all that.
Yeah.
And as I said in the article, nobody went on Monday night to the New Conservatives meeting, which sounds like the real IRA, actually. Nobody went to that meeting. And the only person that objected was blooming Angela, whatever her name is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who got a 5-year-old to write a letter for her. So there hasn't been, he's priced into the fact the ERG are currently in disarray. They may regroup, but nonetheless. So yes, we must keep talking, and we can find quite clever ways to say, how's it all going? I think that's quite a good opener. We can't just rush in and do that, but usually I find ways, and I announce them on my T-shirt, or there's some trigger like a badge or something happens and you can start to talk about it. And I say my preferred mode is the sauna, because I find that people punch me less in the sauna, but that's entirely up to you how you do it.
Can I second that point? We've been running regular stalls in the marketplace in Hitchin, and we find there's a very marked shift in the kind of reactions we've had since we first started doing this. People are much more willing to talk to us, and B, to admit that Brexit has been a mistake.
But it is
on the street. It's very noticeable.
The therapy part of this becomes important. You can't tell an alcoholic they're an alcoholic. They need to tell you they're an alcoholic. So when they say, oh, it's a bit of a mess, we just have to go, maybe we're thinking inside, we knew that, but we have to let them tell us that they're an alcoholic, I think. And James O'Brien is quite good on this, because he's constrained by the radio, and he's also got a power base, so he's got hierarchy on his side, so he can afford to be more, didactic, because, ads every 15 minutes don't allow for the time he's got, but we generally are working on a level playing field, really. So we have to be a little more on the sort of consultative side of the curve.
Brexit was a mistake.
Yep.
Is one way of putting it. But another way of putting it is Brexit was a crime. There was criminal behaviour. They broke the law. They broke the law on electoral canvassing. They broke the law on data privacy. And none of them have been prosecuted or gone to jail. But I'm not suggesting that we should campaign for that. But what I am saying is that there's a new generation now of people who weren't allowed to vote in 2016. And we need to target that generation, because they're not going to learn the lesson. They're going to be told that it was a 52 to 48% referendum. And that in itself was not enough to go ahead and do what they did. Certainly not without accepting that there was a very strong minority of the country who wanted to stay in, and therefore removing all the freedoms or all the rest of it was an absolute disgrace. We all know, I mean, the crime in the first place, of course, was the wording of the referendum, in or out. Simple as that, isn't it? Well, it's not as simple as that, and now we've discovered that. But we need to teach the younger generation this, because this is what they've got to know about. And they must know that there was criminal behaviour. It was only 52 to 48%, and nobody got the Brexit they wanted.
No.
And I think we've got to work on that generation, because they're the people who are not going to know anything about this at all if we don't tell them.
The nobody has got the Brexit they wanted is a very good unifier, actually, John. You've hit on it. The other thing I would say, and I wrote the book in order to generate a list of mass Brexisms, and it failed. It was an educational book, encouraging people to go out and sort of talk to people, have difficult conversations. People didn't want to do that, so I've learnt my lesson. It took 6 months to write, but it actually remains an excellent resource for people that want to talk to people on the street in elections and find ways to talk them round about stuff. So it is a book about the process of mindset change in the context of politics, be it anything really. So it's still available. So I'm no longer worried whether people buy it or not, but it has a lot of stuff. It took a hell of a long time to write. So there is that. The other thing to say, John, which I didn't bring up, there was not enough time really we could be here for a long time on this, and we probably won't. But the UK and the Changing Europe, which are a bunch of academics from King's College, I pinpointed with looking at big data where you can draw out sort of effects and reliably predict them. They drew out that 6 years of austerity actually on its own, if it had been 6 years of austerity, nothing would have happened. But 6 years of austerity plus Nigel Farage's weaponization of that, saying the reason you're having such a terrible time over here is because of those buggers over there, the immigrants. The weaponization of that accounted for a 12% shift in the referendum. So it would have been 60-40 in favour of Remain without Nigel Farage's, I hate to say it, very clever weaponization of that finding. So, of course, David Cameron was right, I suppose you could say, to think, well, it's no problem here. This is a team-building exercise for the Tory party. We'll have the referendum. It'll all go fine. And then I can kill off the people that moan about the EU forever. That was obviously his game plan, but he didn't factor Farage into it. 12%, that's an incredible swing. And that's down to austerity plus Farage. It's well worth tuning into UK and a Changing Europe. They're academics, but they do have some excellent stuff that comes out, by the way, not all of which I fully agree with. I having once been an academic, that means I can argue with them.
I mean, I try to bring up the topic even when I'm shopping. And the other day I was having a conversation with an unknown lady, and she said, oh, I'm disgusted with what this government is doing, etc., etc., etc. And I said, well, if there's a general election, who are you going to vote for? It's just a general question. And then she said, oh, I'm going to vote for Farage. And I said, what? I was shocked.
This brings up the sort of another metaphor.
Yeah, absolutely.
The side-by-side approach. You're at a shopping queue. You're not head on to each other.
No.
That's a much friendlier encounter. You can say more appalling things to people sort of side on side, I think. Do you see what I mean? If you're saying I'm right and you're wrong, that's actually quite difficult. I've got into a lot of arguments about that, but that's just me.
I've learned because I come across quite strongly, as my family tell me. I'm very forthright, very straight. And people say, look, people take averse to you because you're that, you come across very hard. But I was trying to say it very gently. And I said, why Farage? And she said, England wants sovereignty. And I said, and then I wanted to try and further up, and she said, I'm sorry, I don't want to discuss it. And I said, okay, fine. And I left it at that. But I wanted to tell her, Britain has always had its sovereignty. It's never lost it, as all the EU countries also have their own sovereignty.
Well, and as Gina Miller demonstrated in the Supreme Court, and then had death threats and gang rape threats from people.
I've been watching Gina Miller for a long time. In fact, before the Brexit thing went on Question Time, I've watched her speak. So I have been following what's happening. And I think I've taken myself a surprise because I was never into politics when I was younger. Yeah.
You bring up one other important thing that I write, but I'm a very slow typist. And so because I'm an author, I don't waste words on social media, and it always looks very terse in the English language, which often offends. So I'm not too bad when I'm in real life, but I do upset people online because I just don't bother to say hello, how are you? I just say that this is the fact. Which rather there is a bit in the book about what I call online Brexitisms, and it's really hard to do because asynchronous communication means that people can calculate their response, and they say things to you that they wouldn't dare say in a cafe or pub. And it's all, it's a very unprofitable arena to try and Brexitize someone across social media because they hold it's like shouting across a gate, really. It doesn't, there's lots of reasons why online is poorer than social communications. And all the research from America lines up with what I found out sort of by mistake, really. But, if we want to change minds, it's a social process, not a social media process, largely.
Absolutely.
Because there are no experts on social media. Someone yesterday was saying, "I've my opinion, and you have yours." And this was a Remainer talking to me, saying, "What do you know about David Cameron?" I thought, well, I did get it from the horse's mouth in Parliament, but he just said, "I've got my opinion, and you're wrong." So I thought, okay.
Well, ironically, my sister in Spain, and I was talking to her about Cameron and all the rest of them, and what you said is exactly what she said. She said, there's a reason why Sunak has brought Cameron in. And it's a slowly approach to doing what we think he's doing. So
because absolutely, Sunak is not an ideological Brexiteer. He's what I call a practical one. He wants the money. He's got the money, actually, but he wants the money. He wants the disaster capitalism. But Mark Francois wouldn't have done the Windsor framework, for example. Mark Francois wouldn't have done the science program this year, nor probably would some of the other, Suella Braverman certainly wouldn't have done any of that.
Oh, no,
but Sunak is happy with the economic benefits, but he don't care so much about all the other things. So I think he's realised the ERG have been given a fair amount of slack, and he's now edging it back in because he thinks he can. And let's face it, if you were head boy at Winchester and you were head prime minister, you want your Wikipedia page to look really good when you've left.
I mean, I've been goading Suella directly by saying, that there's people who've written really nasty things about her. And I think I put it on Facebook, and someone said, oh, someone's going to get hurt. And I just said, I'm sorry, she deserves it because she's brought it on herself. Okay. And I mean, she comes, her father comes from the same place as I do.
Yeah.
And I'm ashamed to say that this is not the attitude of people, really.
No, if you light fires, fires, do expect you might get burned.
Exactly. It's not only that, but I mean, I don't care what religion or what your ethnicity is. You have to respect people. And refugees are people. They're not animals. You wouldn't treat an animal the way she's treating them and talking down.
They are very much in a corner with this right now, I think. And they've dug that. In fact, business strategy would tell you don't keep digging the hole deeper. But they seem to be unable to not dig the hole deeper. So I wonder, I don't know, but these people are only coat hangers for other people's views. We don't know who the people in Tufton Street and behind in Russia and other places, who's working them. I did write a piece about Suella Braverman after the Tories said that she was mad, I think she didn't use that word, but I said, well, she's either mad or she's being worked by someone, or she actually believes so much in what, she swallowed the Kool-Aid. It's one of those, or maybe some of those things, but
I think some lord or something has written something about her in 2015 when she actually spoke about something working with the EU and all the refugees and all this kind of thing. And he said, I wonder where this person has gone, because this is not the person I knew in 2015. I'll try and send it to you. It was on Twitter.
Just to follow on with Suella, allegedly she photocopied the book. She didn't write her own book. She did a bit of photocopying. I can guarantee that I wrote all of this.
Oh.
And all of that. I didn't
Right.
I didn't just do the photocopying like Suella.